Hello, I'm going to be talking about diagnosing learning disabilities and growing accessibility from learning disabilities. So, a little bit about my interviewee while still keeping her anonymous. She is a white female, about 20 years of age. She works in a memory care unit as a CNA and she helps other people learn how to be a CNA. She is a biohealth science major and she's on her pre PA track. And since she's a junior in college, she is during that application phase of her PA school, which is very hard to get into. I think you need about a 3.85 in order to be considered for the school. And then her disabilities are dyslexia and short term memory loss. When she was younger, she was falsely diagnosed, and her teacher told her that she didn't have a learning disability and that she had ran a test on her, but she actually didn't. And this caused her to struggle for a couple more years with this disability until her parents took her someplace else to go get tested. And after that, she was given accommodations, and she says it has dramatically helped her to get to where she is today. So, some information about dyslexia and short term memory loss. Um, Dyslexia is a specific learning disability that is neurological in origin. It is characterized by difficulties with accurate and or fluent word recognition and by poor spelling and decoding abilities. And then talking about short-term memory loss in regards to dyslexia instead of brain trauma. Dyslexia can have many different impacts on memory, such as short term memory loss, working memory loss, or verbal short term memory loss, which, as you can guess, obviously impacts your memorization skills. So, the area of concern that we kind of came up with was diagnosing kids at a younger age with learning disabilities. And we mainly came up with this because my interviewee was also diagnosed and it caused her to struggle for a couple more years. And she mentioned that if she was diagnosed at a younger age, she would be given the accommodations she needed sooner and not have had the trauma that she went through. And then we also think that giving those opportunities to receive accommodations was a big concern. And then this concern affects students because they are the ones who are actively receiving those accommodations or being diagnosed. Parents because they are the ones who are helping their children and giving them those opportunities. And then teachers because they are the ones that hands on deal with people having learning disabilities and it affects their job. And then what has already been done with this? So there is testing available for learning disabilities. However, I read a couple research articles about how it's not 100% accurate. And um, the next thing is accommodations. There are accommodations. Not 100% of them work for all people with dyslexia or with other learning disabilities. And then just again, those failure to correctly identify learning disabilities, there is still not 100% accurate testing or identification to really say, yes, you have dyslexia, or no, you do not, or any learning disability as is. Some research on dyslexia. So, this was kind of an overview of all of the research that I did. So, what is the best way to diagnose? Implementing monthly checkups and annual teacher trainings are argued to be the most effective way to achieve the goals of improving the identification and diagnosis of learning disabilities. So instead of those tests that I mentioned earlier, this article stated that really doing those hands-on checks and really understanding your students in a long run would be better to identify learning disabilities or dyslexia because you're seeing if maybe one day they had a hiccup or if this is a continuous problem that they have. And then who does diagnosis benefit? As I mentioned earlier, this benefits teachers, students, and parents. Teachers because they're educating their students, and we obviously want to educate students correctly instead of falsely or not giving them opportunities to correctly learn. And then students because they want to feel successful. There's nothing worse than walking out of a room and thinking or knowing that you were the only one in there who didn't understand. And then parents because they want to obviously give their children equal opportunities and because they're the ones that are going to be dealing with the child coming home and struggling with math and crying at the kitchen counter. How do you get dyslexia? So you get dyslexia through inheritance or hereditary through your parents. Gives you a higher risk factor if your parents have dyslexia or someone who you are related to. And it affects your left hemisphere of your brain. fMRIs and PET scans notice reduced activity there, and just difficulty breaking down words come from that. So, the best teaching and personal strategies is teaching reading phonetics, so learning how to pronounce or say things, and then connecting multiple senses. So, drawing in the sand the word, or saying it out loud, hearing someone else say it, the phonetics, or touching a word, moving things around, just connecting everything into one. And then specialized programs that would help with the connecting of multiple senses and reading phonetics, taking someone out during reading or math or science classes and helping them in a different area with the accommodations that they need. And then some personal part would be therapy and self advocacy. So if you have dyslexia, or even if you don't, just advocating that this is hard for you, you feel like you're not going to learn as well as your peers, or that this accommodation is or isn't working. And then that therapy comes from uh, being sought thought of less than your peers at times. That can happen. I know a couple people with learning disabilities who have mentioned that they struggled because a lot of people viewed them as less than their peers or their friends. So me and my interviewee came up with a plan of doing a week of testing. As some of you may or may not have had, there was a week of testing in my middle school, at least for visual and hearing. So I thought that adding another thing of testing wouldn't be bad. And my interviewee mentioned that a week of testing and understanding learning disabilities could benefit everybody. And for the research part, we would do a survey before their testing and then a survey a year after, depending on whether or not they got those accommodations or not. And then just seeing how they affect them overall. And then after that whole entire testing, they would be given accommodations and a pamphlet of their disability, signs, symptoms, some statistics, things like that. So, some examples of this, they're all either yes, no, or sometimes, or from 1 to 5 rating. But the questions would be score your enjoyment in classes such as math, science, technology, and engineering. How would you score your understanding of writing and reading? Do you find that you often have difficult time understanding and following instructions? And do you find these difficulties affect your relationships, for example, with your friends, your peers, or your teachers? This gives us an understanding of both the social and the um, mental aspect of school. And then this is an example of a pamphlet. So this one is an example for dyslexia, but it can work for many different ways. And this would just kind of help students understand what type of learning disability they have if they don't know what it is, because many elementary or middle school students don't really know what learning disabilities are or what specific types are. And it could help with those anxieties or questions that they might have from new diagnoses. And this could include some examples of major signs of the disability, um, just the statistics that it is normal, about 780 million people have it, and that you don't have to struggle. And even though you were diagnosed with something that might seem scary, you will be able to get benefits that will give you more equal opportunities in the world. So, some possible results and solutions. Of course, these results are based off of false data, but these solutions are based off of real research that I read and gathered information. So, some results would be that more students would be diagnosed with learning disabilities, which overall is beneficial not only for gaining more information and data, but also for giving people those accommodations, as I mentioned earlier, and just helping people in their daily lives. I read that it affects how you work, how you do school, really all the things. So, understanding that you have a learning disability will help you in the long run, not just with school. And then more people with learning disabilities can be involved in those fields where education is difficult. I know that there was an article I read about dyslexia and nursing and how a lot of nursing students don't really have a learning disability because it is such dense, hard coursework. But with many people having learning disabilities and getting those accommodations, that can all be made possible. And then bringing to light how common learning disabilities are to help people have ease of mind and just understanding that it is so common to have a learning disability, and then getting those accommodations. Some solutions would be educating people about learning disabilities, specifically teachers. I also put students and parents, but I think that teachers is the biggest one here because they're the ones who are hands on working with people with learning disabilities. And one quote from a research article stated that teachers of these children need understanding of the neurophysiological system of the organism. So, really, just understanding how this affects them and being able to help them through every step. And then some future or further actions. I think it would be really interesting for research to be done on what the best form of testing for learning disabilities would be. I mean, from my interviewee, I know that being falsely diagnosed was really hard for her. So I would want to eliminate that type of struggle for as many people as possible. And then a case study on the research that we did, seeing how those people with learning disabilities move on in life and how those who are false or those who are not diagnosed move on in life, or even just seeing how people who are falsely diagnosed and then later on come out and find out that they have a learning disability and seeing which accommodations worked, what did they feel was struggles in their life, and what they feel could have been better. And then looking into how the teachers noticed the change of the students who were diagnosed with learning disabilities and seeing how they see their uh, like their actions within school. Do they become more happy to see their teachers? Do they become more engaged in class? And then lastly, just what type of accommodations and environment will work best for the students and giving people 100% what will work best for them and not just something that might work, but being positive that this would help them. And then that's my work cited. Thank you so much for listening.